The heart
Pressure's
monitor
dropping. We
screamed
need to
once,
intubate.
a long,
Agreed. Prep the
merciless
tube.
sound
Is he
that
going to be
seemed
okay?
slice
Let
through
them
the
work,
private
honey.
hospital
Tube is
room
in.
like a blade through silk. In the dim blue glow of emergency lights, 20 of the country's most celebrated doctors stood frozen
heart rate is
around the bed
spiking
of the
again.
most powerful
I
man
see
in
it.
the city.
The doctor is on the
The
way.
It's not
billionaire who had
stabilizing.
built glass towers that touched
How
the
is
clouds
he?
now lay small
He's
and
stable, the
colorless
doctor's
beneath white
hopeful.
sheets that looked
Thank
too
you.
pure for a body giving up. Outside, rain battered the windows 30 floors above the ground, turning the skyline into a blur of trembling lights. Inside, machines blinked in cold rhythm, and the air smelled of antiseptic and desperation. If you believe that every story hides a lesson waiting to be discovered, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Humanity Stories. Sometimes the most unexpected moments carry the deepest truths. They had tried everything. Experimental treatments flown in from Europe. Emergency consultations with specialists in Tokyo and New York. Procedures so rare they were whispered about in conferences rather than spoken openly. But nothing could restart the heart that had powered an empire. The billionaire's face, once sharp and commanding on magazine covers, now looked strangely peaceful, almost boyish. Without his tailored suits and diamond cufflinks, he was simply a man at the edge of something final. In the hallway beyond the intensive care unit, the hospital staff stood in stunned silence. Nurses avoided each other's eyes. Interns stared at the floor. The janitor, a thin man with tired shoulders and graying hair, gripped his mop handle as though it were the only solid thing left in the building. He had cleaned these floors for 12 years. He had watched this hospital expand, watched new wings open, watched powerful people arrive with entourages and leave with guarded expressions. But he had never seen a silence like this. Beside him stood his daughter. She was 17, small and slight, wearing a faded navy sweater and worn sneakers, her dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her eyes, however, did not carry the same fear as everyone else's. They carried focus, a quiet, unsettling kind of focus. She had grown up waiting for her father to finish late shifts, sitting in corners of hospital cafeterias, reading old medical textbooks that doctors discarded. She had listened more than anyone realized. She had watched procedures through half-open doors. She had memorized patterns in the beeping machines the way other teenagers memorized song lyrics. When the final attempt failed and one of the senior surgeons removed his gloves with trembling hands, whispering that it was over, something inside her tightened. Not arrogance, not recklessness, just an unbearable sense that something had been missed. The doors to the ICU opened briefly as the doctors stepped out, their faces pale under fluorescent lights. In that brief opening, she saw the monitors. She saw the faint irregular flicker that everyone else had already dismissed as noise. And in that instant, her body moved before fear could stop it. She slipped inside. The room felt colder than the hallway. The billionaire's wife was collapsed in a chair, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, whispering prayers to a god she hadn't spoken to in years. The machines hummed in mechanical indifference. The girl approached the bed, her heart pounding so violently she thought it might drown out the monitors. She didn't see a billionaire. She saw a failing pattern. Her mind replayed something she had read in an outdated cardiology journal, a rare electrical misfire condition that mimicked total cardiac arrest on standard readings. A condition so uncommon most doctors would never encounter it. A condition requiring one precise intervention, timed perfectly, before the heart surrendered completely. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not as she called for the defibrillator paddles still resting nearby. A nurse stared at her in disbelief. The janitor's daughter should not have been in that room. She should not have been touching those machines. But something in her eyes, something steady and urgent, cut through protocol. She adjusted the settings, not to the standard level the team had used repeatedly, but slightly different. Slightly higher. Slightly delayed. For a second, the world narrowed to a single blinking line on a screen. She pressed. The billionaire's body jolted once, sharply, then fell still again. The flatline continued. The air thickened. The nurse inhaled to protest. Then it happened. A faint blip. Another. Then a slow, fragile rhythm, uneven, uncertain, but undeniably there. The monitor's tone shifted from a scream to a hesitant pulse, like a newborn testing its lungs for the first time. The girl stepped back, her knees suddenly weak. Doctors rushed in, disbelief etched across faces trained never to show it. They recalibrated, stabilized, administered support. But the rhythm held. Rain continued to strike the windows, but inside the room, something invisible had shifted. Hours later, as dawn stretched pale gold fingers across the city, the billionaire's eyelids fluttered open. His gaze wandered slowly, confused and fragile. He did not see the 20 renowned doctors first. He saw a blurry silhouette near the doorway, a girl in a navy sweater, standing beside a janitor who looked as though he might collapse from emotion. In the weeks that followed, headlines exploded with theories and praise for the medical team. Committees were formed. Interviews were requested. The hospital board held meetings behind closed doors. The official explanation credited collective persistence and advanced technology. But in quiet corners of the building, nurses whispered the truth to one another. They spoke about the girl who watched and listened when no one noticed. The girl who refused to accept that the story was over. The billionaire recovered slowly. His empire waited impatiently, markets fluctuating with every update about his health. Yet something in him had altered more profoundly than his heartbeat. He began visiting the lower floors of the hospital during physical therapy sessions, asking questions he had never asked before. He noticed the janitor's worn gloves. He noticed the cafeteria workers who arrived before sunrise. He noticed the girl who returned to her textbooks after school, still sitting in corners, still invisible to most. He did not make grand speeches. He did not stage public ceremonies. Instead, scholarships quietly appeared. Research grants expanded. The hospital created a program allowing staff families access to advanced medical training resources. The changes unfolded softly, without fanfare, like light spreading at dawn. But the most powerful transformation wasn't institutional. It was human. One evening, months later, the billionaire stood alone by the same window where rain had once blurred his final moments. The skyline shimmered beneath a calm sky. He placed his hand over his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath his palm, a rhythm that existed because a 17-year-old girl refused to see him as untouchable. And somewhere in the building, she walked beside her father through polished hallways,